The F-100 Super Sabre is one of the most influential jet fighters in United States history, ushering in a new era of aerial combat where planes would fly at supersonic speed in order to achieve aerial dominance. Behold, the North American F-100 Super Sabre, America's first supersonic jet. At the onset of the Vietnam War, the U.S. Air Force knew it needed a supersonic jet fighter to combat the Russian-built competition. In order to understand the F-100, we must first look into the circumstances that led to it being built. A brief history of jet fighters. At the onset of World War II, the Germans had been studying jet power. This resulted in the construction of the Me-262. This fighter could fly higher and faster than any of the propeller-driven competition. This prompted the British to create their own by the name of the Gloucester Meteor, and for what it's worth, the British plane could pretty much do everything the Me-262 could. The Americans also attempted to make a jet plane during World War II, but we don't talk about that. Because of these aircraft, it was clear, the future of military aviation belonged to the jet engine. Cold War competition. After World War II, most of the large victorious nations received Nazi engineers. With these engineers came secret jet fighter blueprints the Nazis had been cooking up during the war. These engineers were very influential in the designs of the fighter aircraft to come. See for yourself. Here is what a classified Nazi jet fighter concept looked like. The resemblance of this to both the US and Russian jet fighters to come are uncanny. These concepts made in Germany in the 40s would lead to both the American F-86 Sabre and the Russian MiG-15, and that's where our story begins. The F-86 Sabre. In the mid-50s, the United States had an issue. Their Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star jet fighters were constantly getting shot down by Russian-built MiG-15s. The newly created Air Force thought, we can't let these commies beat us. So, in typical American fashion, they thought, make something that looks just like it, just bigger and faster. And so the F-86 Sabre was born. The F-86 Sabre was a first for America in a lot of things. Although not technically rated for supersonic flight, it did go supersonic in controlled tests. It was also America's first swept-wing fighter. Swept wings allow for faster speed due to better aerodynamic qualities. This was a big upgrade over the classic straight-wing configuration most fighters of World War II had, and this would allow the F-86 to more easily combat the Russian-built MiG-15. In fact, I think this might be the first and only time the Americans had copied something the Russians had made instead of the other way around. Here are a few examples. As time went on, modifications were made to both planes in order to, well, more effectively kill each other until no modifications could be done without making a new plane. Times were changing, and the US needed a new fighter. Development of the F-100 Super Sabre. Most of the time, when the US is on a hunt for a new plane, they contract companies to build prototypes based on the specific needs of the Air Force. However, in the case of the F-100, North American contacted the US government with a proposal of an upgraded F-86 that was rated for supersonic flight. And thus, Project Codename 45 began, named after the 45-degree sweep of the then unnamed F-100's wings. Many prototypes and mock-ups would be made until the US Air Force would accept and rename the aircraft to F-100. Why F-100A? The road to creating one of the most influential jet fighters of the 21st century was not an easy one. Although the aircraft hit a top speed of Mach 1.05, there were still many issues that needed to be addressed. A problem caused by the undersized vertical stabilizer resulted in the death of North American's chief test pilot, George Welsh. Another issue was created by the sudden loss of lift in the wings during takeoff, resulting in uncontrollable pitch and yaw, nicknamed the Sabre Dance by company employees. North American combated these issues by tweaking the wings, thinning out and elongating the vertical stabilizer, and manipulating the shape of the aircraft and its intake in order to make it more aerodynamic. What resulted from these efforts was a somewhat strange-looking, almost humpback plane with a long, hollow snout and sharp, low-mounted swept wings. It wasn't pretty, that was to be sure. However, the US Air Force deemed it worthy enough for service, though they were a bit unsure due to its shaky track record. In 1954, the Air Force would buy a number of them, and these planes would be in service until 1969, just enough time to enter the Vietnam War. The changing roles of the F-100 in the Vietnam War. Though initially, the F-100s in Vietnam were used to escort F-105s in the bombing role, the Air Force discovered that the aircraft were not good matchups against the North Vietnamese MiG-17s and MiG-21s in air-to-air combat. Because of this, F-100s served most of the war exclusively in the close air support role. Here they would protect ground forces mainly in South Vietnam, southern North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. F-100 pilots gained a reputation for getting in low, especially in close air support missions. The low altitude improved accuracy, important when some missions required dropping bombs within about 165 feet. Although the F-100 did not fulfill its designed role, it is still recognized as a very successful aircraft, having flown the most missions of any aircraft in the Vietnam War. Not only did the F-100 fly the most missions of the Vietnam War, it also scored the first American aerial combat kill of the war as well. These factors together would spawn a long foreign history for the F-100 as well. F-100s were bought and used by several countries, including Taiwan, Denmark, France, and Turkey. Impact. After all was said and done, the F-100 ended up being a well-rounded, successful aircraft. It really changed the game as far as aerial combat went, well, for the Americans at least. Being America's first supersonic jet meant that it would have to have massive legacy, seeing as most jet fighters that came next would also be supersonic. Not only this, but it would also spawn what the Air Force called the Century Series. The Century Series of fighters are a group of fighters that were built over a short period of time. In this series, each fighter would have a designated number in the hundreds. These fighters include the North American F-100 Super Sabre, McDonnell F-101 Voodoo, Convair F-102 Delta Dagger, Lockheed F-104 Starfighter, and the Republic F-105 Thunder Chief. These fighters would also have successful careers, showing just how influential the F-100 Super Sabre